Have you ever wondered why two people can work equally hard, take similar risks, and yet end up creating completely different levels of impact? Imagine this for a moment. Two people start businesses at the same time. One opens a coffee shop just like the 10 already present on the same street. The other creates something that has never existed before. Both put in long hours. Both face uncertainty. But only one of them is truly moving the world forward. This simple contrast captures the core idea of 0 to 1, and once you grasp it, your view of business, careers, and progress begins to shift permanently. Most people assume progress means doing more of what already works. More shops, more apps, more content, more competition. This kind of progress feels visible and measurable. The book calls this movement from one to many. You take an existing idea and spread it wider. There is nothing inherently wrong with this approach, but it is not innovation. It is replication. Real progress, according to 0 to 1, happens when you move from 0 to 1. That means creating something entirely new, something that did not exist before, something that opens a fresh chapter instead of repeating an old one. 0 to 1 is hard precisely because there is no clear path. When you copy, you can follow examples. When you compete, you can analyze rivals. But when you create something new, there is no guidebook. You are stepping into uncertainty. That uncertainty scares most people. Improving what already exists feels safer than inventing what does not. But safety often limits impact, and comfort rarely produces breakthroughs. Think about it practically. If you launch another food delivery app in a market already full of them, you are immediately fighting for attention, margins, and survival. You are entering a game where the rules are already written and the winners are mostly decided. But if you invent a completely new way for people to solve a problem, you are not just playing the game, you are defining it. That is the difference between growth and transformation. This idea extends far beyond startups. It applies to careers, skills, and how you think. When you follow the same path everyone else follows, earn the same qualifications, apply for the same roles, and compete with thousands of similar candidates, you are moving from one to many. You might succeed, but you remain replaceable. 0 to 1 thinking asks a tougher question. What can you do that very few people can? What unique value can you create instead of competing for value that already exists? The uncomfortable truth is that competition often looks productive while quietly destroying value. When everyone races in the same direction, prices fall, profits vanish, and creativity fades. 0 to 1 thinking shifts the focus. Instead of asking how to beat others, you begin asking how to build something so different the competition no longer matters. This mindset also redefines progress itself. Progress is not just faster copies or cheaper versions. It is about creating new possibilities. The invention of electricity reshaped civilization. The rise of the internet gave birth to entirely new industries. These were 0 to 1 moments. Everything that followed was expansion. When you truly understand 0 to 1, you stop chasing trends and start questioning assumptions. You stop asking what is popular and start asking what is missing. You stop trying to fit in and start creating something original. This mindset is uncomfortable and risky, but it is where real breakthroughs are born. At its core, 0 to 1 is not just a business idea. It is a way of seeing the world. It is the belief that the future is not something we wait for or copy, but something we actively build. And every meaningful change, every great company, and every powerful idea begins the same way, not from one to many, but from 0 to 1. Once you understand the difference between copying and creating, The next question naturally appears: if 0 to 1 ideas are so powerful, why don't more people pursue them? The answer lies in how humans think. Most of us are trained to agree, not to question. We trust crowds, experts, trends, and popular opinions. This is where contrarian thinking becomes essential, because every 0 to 1 idea begins as a thought that goes against what most people believe. The core challenge is simple but uncomfortable. If an idea is truly new, most people will not believe in it at first. They may laugh at it, ignore it, or even criticize it. History shows this pattern again and again. Breakthrough ideas rarely arrive with applause. They arrive with doubt. This is why 0 to 1 emphasizes asking a very specific question. What important truth do very few people agree with you on? This question forces you to step outside consensus and examine reality for yourself. Consensus thinking feels safe because it reduces personal responsibility. If everyone believes something, it feels less risky to believe it too. But consensus also creates blind spots. When everyone agrees on the same assumptions, nobody looks in the opposite direction. Contrarian thinking is not about disagreeing for attention. It is about seeing what others are missing because they are too busy agreeing with each other. Many people confuse contrarian thinking with being negative or rebellious. That is a mistake. True contrarian thinking is deeply rational. It requires evidence, insight, and courage. It asks you to quietly observe where the crowd is wrong or incomplete. Sometimes the crowd is right, but when it is wrong, it is usually wrong together. That creates massive opportunity for those willing to think independently. This idea is especially important in business and careers. If everyone is chasing the same opportunities, those opportunities become crowded and less valuable. High competition, low margins, and constant pressure are signs that too many people believe in the same thing. Contrarian thinkers look for areas where demand exists, but belief does not. They search for problems people underestimate or ignore entirely. However, contrarian ideas come with emotional difficulty. Being early feels the same as being wrong. When nobody agrees with you, self-doubt naturally appears. This is why many people abandon original ideas too quickly. 0 to 1 thinking requires patience and conviction. You must be willing to hold a belief long before the world validates it. That does not mean ignoring feedback, but it does mean trusting your reasoning more than public opinion. Another key point is that contrarian truths are often hidden in plain sight. They are not always dramatic or futuristic. Sometimes they are simple observations that others overlook because they seem boring or uncomfortable. For example, noticing inefficiencies everyone accepts as normal, or questioning rules that exist only because nobody challenged them before. These small insights can lead to massive breakthroughs when acted upon. Contrarian thinking also reshapes how you learn. Instead of memorizing answers, you start questioning questions. Instead of copying success stories, you analyze why they worked and whether those conditions still exist. This approach builds original judgment, which is far more valuable than borrowed knowledge. In a rapidly changing world, the ability to think independently becomes a competitive advantage. As this idea builds on 0 to 1, it becomes clear that creating the future is not about predicting trends, but about discovering truths before they become obvious. Every meaningful innovation begins as a minority belief. The people who shape the future are not those who follow consensus, but those who are brave enough to challenge it thoughtfully. And once you accept that, you stop waiting for permission to think differently. and you start actively searching for ideas worth believing in before anyone else does. When contrarian thinking leads you to a powerful idea, the next challenge is how you position yourself in the real world. This is where most people make a critical mistake. Instead of asking how to create something unique, they immediately ask how to compete. 0 to 1 delivers a blunt but important insight here. Competition is not a sign of success. It is a sign of failure. And the more you understand this, the more clearly you see why so many businesses struggle despite working extremely hard. Competition feels noble. It feels like effort, hustle, and ambition. Society praises it. We are taught that competition makes us better, sharper, stronger. But in business, intense competition often does the opposite. When many companies fight for the same customers with similar products, they are forced to lower prices, cut margins, and sacrifice long-term vision just to survive. Everyone works harder, yet nobody truly wins. The problem with competition is that it focuses your energy outward instead of inward. Instead of asking how to build something better, you obsess over rivals. You copy their features, match their prices, and react to their moves. Over time, your company loses its identity. It no longer exists to solve a problem in a unique way. It exists to not fall behind. This reactive mindset slowly kills innovation. 0 to 1 challenges the popular belief that the best businesses are the most competitive ones. In reality, the best businesses are the ones that escape competition entirely. When you are truly unique, customers choose you not because you are cheaper or louder, but because you offer something they cannot get anywhere else. In that situation, competition becomes irrelevant. You are not fighting for attention. You are defining the category. There is also a psychological cost to competition. Constant comparison creates stress, fear, and short-term thinking. Businesses trapped in competitive markets become obsessed with quarterly numbers instead of long-term value. Decisions are made defensively rather than creatively. Instead of building a great product over years, companies rush half-finished ideas just to keep up. This is how entire industries get stuck making incremental improvements instead of meaningful breakthroughs. Another important insight is that competition often hides the truth about success. When multiple companies survive in the same space, it looks healthy from the outside. But internally, many of them are barely profitable. They rely on volume instead of value. They depend on constant effort rather than structural advantage. 0 to 1 argues that a business should be designed to win by default, not by exhaustion. This idea applies beyond companies. In careers, competition can also be a trap. If you enter a field where millions of people have the same skills, the same qualifications, and the same goals, you are competing on narrow margins. Even if you succeed, you remain replaceable. The 0 to 1 approach encourages you to build rare skills, unique combinations, or original paths where competition is minimal or non-existent. It is important to understand that avoiding competition does not mean avoiding ambition. It means redirecting ambition toward creation instead of rivalry. The goal is not to beat others at their own game, but to build a game so different that others are forced to follow you or stay out entirely. This requires courage, clarity, and patience, but it leads to far greater rewards. As this idea settles in, a shift begins to happen. You stop asking how crowded a market is and start asking how differentiated you can be. You stop worrying about rivals and start focusing on value creation. And once you experience what it feels like to operate without constant competition, it becomes clear why 0 to 1 makes such a strong claim. Competition may look like progress, but true progress begins when you no longer need to compete at all. If competition is a sign of failure, then the obvious question becomes, what does success actually look like? 0 to 1 gives a clear and surprising answer: monopoly. Not the scary, exploitative version people usually imagine, but a very specific kind of monopoly that is essential for real innovation and long-term value creation. Understanding this idea completely changes how you judge great businesses. Most people instinctively hate the word monopoly. They associate it with greed, control, and unfair power. But the book flips this thinking. A good monopoly is not one that crushes others through force or manipulation. It is one that wins by being so good at what it does that no one else can realistically offer the same value. Customers choose it freely, not because they are forced, but because there is no better alternative. A monopoly in this sense is the reward for creating something truly unique. When a company solves a problem in a way no one else can, it earns pricing power, stability, and freedom. That freedom is critical. It allows the company to focus on long-term improvement instead of short-term survival. While competitive businesses are stuck fighting for margins, monopolies can invest in research, talent, and bold ideas that push progress forward. One of the strongest arguments in 0 to 1 is that monopolies actually serve customers better over time. Competitive markets push companies to cut costs constantly, often at the expense of quality, ethics, or innovation. Monopolies, on the other hand, can afford to think years ahead. They can build better products, improve user experience, and create entirely new solutions without worrying about being copied immediately. Another important point is that monopolies often hide in plain sight. They rarely call themselves monopolies. Instead, they describe themselves as small players in large markets. This is intentional. Saying you dominate a niche sounds dangerous, but framing yourself as part of a broader category feels safer. In reality, many great companies control a very specific market segment almost completely, even if the overall industry looks crowded. This perspective also changes how you evaluate business success. In competitive markets, revenue alone can be misleading. A company may look impressive from the outside while barely making profits. A monopoly, even a small one, can be far more valuable because it generates consistent, predictable cash flows. Stability matters more than scale when it comes to long-term impact. The idea of monopoly also connects deeply with 0 to 1 thinking. You cannot copy your way into monopoly status. If others can easily replicate what you do, you are not unique enough. Monopoly forces you to ask harder questions. What am I building that cannot be replaced? What value do I offer that compounds over time instead of disappearing under pressure? On a personal level, this concept applies to individuals as well. When your skills are common, you compete. When your skills are rare and combined in a unique way, you become irreplaceable. That is a form of personal monopoly. You are not competing for opportunities. Opportunities come to you because you offer something others cannot. As the logic of 0 to 1 unfolds, monopoly stops sounding like a threat and starts sounding like a goal. Not dominance through force, but leadership through uniqueness. Not control through restriction, but influence through value creation. Once you understand this, you stop chasing crowded spaces and start designing paths where you can stand alone. And that is exactly where 0 to 1 progress begins to show its true power. Once the idea of a monopoly is no longer seen as something evil, but as something earned, the next logical question is how such a position is actually built. 0 to 1 does not treat monopoly as luck or accident. It breaks it down into clear patterns that explain why some businesses become untouchable while others remain vulnerable forever. These patterns reveal that monopolies are designed, not discovered. The first and most powerful path is proprietary technology. This is not about being slightly better, but dramatically better. The book emphasizes a simple rule. Your product should be at least 10 times better than the closest alternative in some meaningful dimension. That difference could be speed, cost, convenience, or capability. Small improvements can be copied. Big leaps cannot. When your technology solves a problem so effectively that switching feels irrational, you begin to separate yourself from competition. The second path is network effects. A product with network effects becomes more valuable as more people use it. Social platforms are the easiest example, but the idea goes deeper than that. When users themselves create value for other users, the business gains momentum that is extremely difficult to stop. New competitors face a cold start problem because they are empty, while the existing network is alive and active. Over time, this creates a self-reinforcing advantage that grows stronger with scale. The third path is economies of scale. Some businesses become stronger simply because they are large. As they grow, their cost per unit decreases, allowing them to operate more efficiently than smaller competitors. This advantage compounds slowly, which is why it is often underestimated early on. Startups that understand this design their operations in a way that rewards growth rather than punishes it. Once scale is achieved, catching up becomes nearly impossible for newcomers. The fourth path is branding, but not in the superficial sense. Branding here means becoming a symbol of trust, quality, or identity in the minds of customers. A strong brand is not built through advertising alone. It is built through consistent experience over time. When people associate a brand with a specific feeling or standard, alternatives feel inferior, even if they are technically similar. This emotional connection creates loyalty that competitors struggle to break. What makes these four paths powerful is that they often work together. A company might begin with proprietary technology, then develop network effects, then benefit from scale, and finally solidify its position through branding. The strongest monopolies usually combine more than one of these advantages, creating layers of protection around their core business. 0 to 1 also warns that many startups misunderstand these ideas. They focus too much on short-term traction and too little on long-term defensibility. Early growth can feel like success, but without a monopoly foundation, that growth is fragile. If your advantage disappears the moment others notice you, you are never truly building a durable business. This framework changes how you evaluate ideas. Instead of asking whether something can make money quickly, you start asking whether it can remain valuable over time. You stop chasing easy wins and start designing systems that compound. Monopoly thinking shifts your focus from survival to sustainability. On a personal level, the same logic applies. Skills that anyone can learn easily do not create leverage. But when you combine rare abilities, unique insights, and long-term consistency, you build a form of personal monopoly. You become known for something specific, something difficult to replace. By understanding these four paths, 0 to 1 moves from philosophy to strategy. It shows that monopoly is not about domination through force, but about building advantages so strong that competition fades naturally. And once you see how intentional this process is, you realize that creating something truly unique is not just possible, It is a matter of design, patience, and clarity of thought. After understanding how monopolies are built, the next idea feels almost counterintuitive, yet it is one of the most practical lessons in 0 to 1. Instead of trying to conquer a massive market immediately, the book argues that the smartest way to build something big is to start very small. Not small in ambition, but small in focus. This is where many founders go wrong because they confuse large markets with large opportunities. Most people believe that a startup should target a huge audience from day one. They think big vision means big market, but when you try to serve everyone at once, you usually end up serving no one particularly well. Large markets are crowded, noisy, and competitive. Entering them early forces you to fight established players with more money, more users, and more influence. That is not strategy. That is wishful thinking. 0 to 1 flips this logic. A small market is not a weakness. It is an advantage. When a market is small enough, you can dominate it completely. You can understand customers deeply, solve their problems better than anyone else, and become the obvious choice. Dominance, even in a tiny niche, is far more powerful than being a small player in a massive space. This approach also allows for clarity. In a narrow market, feedback is sharper and signals are stronger. You know exactly who your product is for and why it matters. There is no confusion about positioning. Customers do not compare you with 10 alternatives because there are no real alternatives. That is how monopoly begins, quietly and often unnoticed. Many legendary companies followed this exact path. They did not look impressive at the beginning because their markets seemed insignificant. But that was the point. By owning a niche completely, they built strength without pressure. Once they became undeniable leaders in a small space, expanding into adjacent markets became natural and almost inevitable. Growth came as a consequence of dominance, not desperation. Another important reason to start small is execution. Big visions can become excuses for weak execution. When the goal is too broad, teams lose focus. Progress becomes abstract. But in a small market, results are measurable. Either customers love what you are building, or they do not. This forces discipline and accountability. It is much harder to hide behind hype when your audience is specific and close. Starting small also reduces risk. Instead of betting everything on unproven assumptions, you test them in a controlled environment. You learn what works before scaling. This learning compounds. When expansion finally happens, it is guided by real understanding rather than guesswork. That is how companies grow intelligently instead of collapsing under their own ambition. This idea applies beyond startups. In careers, trying to be good at everything often leads to being exceptional at nothing. But becoming the best at a very specific skill or niche creates leverage. Once you are recognized for something unique, opportunities expand outward. Your reputation grows faster because it has a clear foundation. The deeper message here is about patience and sequencing. 0 to 1 is not against big outcomes. It is against premature scale. It teaches that strength must come before size. A weak company in a large market will struggle, but a strong company in a small market can rewrite its future. When you truly absorb this lesson, your mindset shifts. You stop chasing attention and start chasing mastery. You stop worrying about how big the opportunity looks today and start focusing on how completely you can own it. And once you own something fully, expansion is no longer a risk. It becomes the natural next step in a journey that began by starting small and thinking long-term. Once you accept the power of starting small and dominating quietly, a deeper question begins to surface. Where do these overlooked opportunities actually come from? 0 to 1 answers this through one of its most thought-provoking ideas, secrets. This concept goes beyond business strategy and touches the way most people misunderstand the world around them. A secret in this context is not something mysterious or hidden behind locked doors. It is a truth about how the world works that very few people recognize or believe. The modern mindset assumes that almost everything important has already been discovered. People believe that progress now is only about incremental improvement, not breakthrough. This belief is dangerous because it closes the door to original thinking before it even begins. When people stop believing in secrets, they stop looking for them. They assume that if an opportunity were real, someone else would have already taken it. This creates a strange paradox where obvious problems remain unsolved simply because everyone believes they must already be solved. 0 to 1 challenges this assumption directly. It argues that the world is still full of secrets, waiting for those who are willing to look where others are not. Secrets often exist in areas people consider boring, unglamorous, or too difficult. They live inside inefficient systems, outdated rules, unaccepted limitations. Because these areas lack excitement, they attract less attention. That lack of attention is exactly what creates opportunity. When everyone is chasing trends, the real leverage hides in what people ignore. Finding secrets requires a shift in how you observe reality. Instead of asking what is popular, you ask what is broken. Instead of asking what people want loudly, you ask what they need quietly. This kind of thinking demands curiosity and honesty. You have to be willing to question assumptions that others accept without thought. Many secrets are visible only to those who are close enough to a problem to notice its flaws. Another important aspect of secrets is that they often feel uncomfortable. If a truth were easy to accept, it would not remain a secret for long. Secrets challenge existing beliefs, industries, or identities. That is why they are resisted. When someone points out a hidden opportunity, the first reaction is usually disbelief rather than curiosity. This social resistance is one of the reasons secrets stay hidden. 0 to 1 also explains that great businesses are built by discovering secrets and organizing them into reality. Innovation is not random inspiration. It is the systematic search for overlooked truths. Once a secret is discovered, the challenge becomes execution. The gap between knowing a secret and turning it into value is where skill, timing, and courage matter most. This idea also reshapes how you think about education and expertise. Traditional learning often teaches what is already known. While this knowledge is useful, it rarely leads to breakthroughs. Secrets are found at the edges of knowledge, not the center. They belong to those who combine learning with observation, theory with real-world exposure. That is why many powerful ideas come from people who deeply understand a specific problem rather than those who simply study it from a distance. On a personal level, believing in secrets changes your relationship with the future. Instead of seeing the world as complete and fixed, you begin to see it as unfinished and flexible. You stop assuming that all paths are already taken. This belief alone can be a competitive advantage. While others wait for instructions or trends, you begin searching for truths that have not yet been widely accepted. As 0 to 1 builds its argument, secrets become the bridge between thinking differently and building something valuable. They are proof that originality is still possible. The future does not belong only to those with more resources or better connections. It belongs to those who believe that hidden opportunities still exist and are willing to search for them patiently, thoughtfully, and before anyone else does. Once you begin to believe that secrets still exist, the next realization is that not all progress is created equal. Some changes simply spread what already exists, while others fundamentally reshape how the world works. This distinction is crucial in 0 to 1, because it explains why certain eras feel transformative while others feel stagnant despite constant activity. The book separates progress into two types. The first is expansion, where existing ideas are copied and distributed more widely. When a successful model is repeated across countries or markets, the world looks busier and bigger, but not necessarily better. This kind of progress increases scale, not depth. It improves access, not capability. While expansion can create short-term growth, it rarely creates long-term breakthroughs. The second type of progress comes from technology. Technology, in this sense, is not about gadgets or apps. It is about solving problems in entirely new ways. When technology advances, humanity gains new tools, new abilities, and new options that did not exist before. This is vertical progress. It moves society from 0 to 1. Everything else that follows is built on top of that leap. A common mistake people make is assuming globalization and technology are the same. They are not. Globalization spreads ideas. Technology creates them. You can take an existing system and scale it worldwide, but if the system itself is flawed or limited, scaling only magnifies those limits. Without new technology, progress eventually slows, no matter how efficiently ideas are shared. 0 to 1 argues that modern society has become overly focused on distribution rather than creation. We are extremely good at copying, optimizing, and scaling, but less committed to inventing. This is why many industries feel stuck, making incremental improvements instead of bold leaps. The mindset has shifted from asking, "What can we build?" to "How can we distribute this faster?" Real technological progress requires long-term thinking. It demands patience, experimentation, and tolerance for failure. These qualities are uncomfortable in a world driven by short-term results and quick validation. As a result, truly transformative ideas often struggle to gain early support. They do not fit neatly into existing models, and that makes them risky to pursue. Another important insight is that technology is fundamentally about problem-solving, not convenience. The most valuable technologies address hard, meaningful problems rather than superficial ones. They change what is possible, not just what is popular. When technology is used only to capture attention or reduce friction in trivial tasks, its potential is wasted. This perspective also changes how you evaluate startups and innovation. Instead of asking whether something is trending, you ask whether it creates new capability. Instead of measuring success by user growth alone, you examine whether the product solves a problem in a way that was previously impossible. This lens filters out noise and highlights true progress. On a personal level, this idea applies to skills and thinking as well. Learning tools that simply make you faster at common tasks keeps you competitive. Learning skills that allow you to do things others cannot makes you valuable. Vertical progress in your own life means developing abilities that open new paths rather than crowding you into existing ones. 0 to 1 ultimately warns that a future built only on expansion is fragile. Without new technology, society becomes dependent on rearranging existing resources instead of creating new ones. That leads to stagnation, conflict, and diminishing returns. Progress slows, not because effort disappears, but because imagination does. As this idea connects back to secrets, it becomes clear that technology is the mechanism through which hidden truths become real-world impact. Secrets reveal what is missing. Technology makes it possible to build what is missing. When these two come together, progress accelerates in a way that no amount of copying ever could. And that is why 0 to 1 insists that the future is not something we scale into existence, but something we invent. As the picture of innovation and technology becomes clearer, there is a dangerous assumption that often sneaks in without being noticed. Many people start believing that if something is truly new and valuable, it will automatically succeed. 0 to 1 strongly disagrees with this belief. In fact, one of its most practical warnings is that even the best technology can fail if it is not distributed properly. Creation alone is not enough. How something reaches people matters just as much as what is being built. There is a popular myth, especially among builders and creators, that a great product sells itself. This sounds logical and comforting, but reality is far harsher. The world is full of well-designed products that never found users, customers, or adoption. Not because they lacked quality, but because no one knew how to bring them to the market effectively. Distribution is not a side activity. It is a core function of any successful business. 0 to 1 highlights that many startups underestimate sales and marketing because they feel uncomfortable or manipulative. Engineers and creators often prefer building to selling. They assume selling is somehow inferior or unnecessary. This mindset is dangerous. If you do not actively shape how your product reaches people, chance will do it for you, and chance is rarely kind to startups. Distribution takes many forms. It can be direct sales, partnerships, viral loops, content, branding, or long-term relationships. What matters is not the label, but whether the channel is repeatable and scalable. A one-time spike in attention is not distribution. Sustainable growth comes from systems that work consistently over time, even when excitement fades. Another critical insight is that distribution should be designed alongside the product, not added later as an afterthought. When companies build something without a clear path to users, they often struggle to retrofit sales strategies that do not align with the product's nature. The strongest businesses are those where the product and distribution reinforce each other naturally. The way the product spreads feels almost inevitable. 0 to 1 also emphasizes that small differences in distribution effectiveness can create massive differences in outcomes. Two companies with similar products can have radically different results based on how they reach customers. One may quietly disappear, while the other dominates the market. This gap is often invisible from the outside, but it is decisive on the inside. There is also a long-term aspect to distribution that many overlook. The goal is not just to acquire customers, but to keep them. Retention, trust, and habit are forms of distribution that compound over time. When users stay and advocate naturally, growth becomes smoother and more resilient. This is far more powerful than constantly chasing new attention. This idea connects deeply with monopoly thinking. A company with strong distribution has leverage. It does not rely on luck or virality alone. It controls its connection to customers. That control creates stability and makes competition even harder. New entrants may copy the product, but they struggle to replicate the channels and relationships that took years to build. On a personal level, distribution applies to ideas and skills as well. Talent that is invisible has limited impact. Knowing how to communicate value, build networks, and position yourself is part of creating leverage. Execution without exposure often leads to frustration, not success. As 0 to 1 continues to unfold, this lesson grounds the philosophy in reality. Innovation creates possibility, but distribution turns possibility into impact. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. It simply shifts power away from you. When creation and distribution work together, ideas do not just exist. They move, spread, and shape the world in lasting ways. After understanding creation, secrets, technology, and distribution, everything finally points toward one deeper question. How do you actually think about the future itself? 0 to 1 ends on this mindset shift, because without it, all the strategies discussed earlier fall apart. The book argues that the future is not something that simply happens to us. It is something that can be designed, but only by people who believe that planning and conviction still matter. Most people today are optimistic, but in a very passive way. They believe the future will somehow be better, but they have no clear idea how or why. This is what the book describes as indefinite optimism. People expect improvement, yet they rely on luck, trends, or institutions to make it happen. They adapt, react, and follow, but they do not build with intention. This mindset leads to comfort, not progress. In contrast, definite optimism is the belief that the future can be better because you have a specific plan to make it better. This is the mindset behind every meaningful 0 to 1 breakthrough. Definite optimists do not wait for clarity, they create it. They commit to a vision, even when outcomes are uncertain. Instead of diversifying effort to stay safe, they concentrate effort to build something meaningful. This difference explains why great founders and innovators think so differently from the average person. They are not just hopeful, they are deliberate. They believe tomorrow can be different from today, and they are willing to take responsibility for shaping it. This belief is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. If the future is not improving, it is not because it is unknowable, but because no one is building it properly. 0 to 1 argues that modern society has slowly drifted away from definite thinking. Education trains people to follow clear paths laid out by others. Careers reward predictability more than originality. As a result, many talented people choose safe roles instead of ambitious projects. The irony is that this collective caution creates stagnation, even though individual effort remains high. This idea ties everything together. 0 to 1 progress requires contrarian thinking, monopoly building, discovery of secrets, real technology, and strong distribution. But none of it works without the belief that the future is something you can intentionally shape. Without definite optimism, people default to copying what already exists because copying feels safer than creating. On a personal level, this concept is powerful. It forces you to ask uncomfortable questions about your own direction. Are you building towards something specific, or are you simply reacting to circumstances? Are you following paths because they are proven, or because they align with a vision you actually believe in? 0 to 1 is not asking everyone to start a company. It is asking everyone to stop outsourcing their thinking about the future. When you adopt definite optimism, your decisions change. You value long-term learning over short-term comfort. You choose depth over popularity. You commit to ideas that may take time instead of chasing quick validation. This mindset does not guarantee success, but it dramatically increases the chance of meaningful impact. Ultimately, 0 to 1 is not a book about startups alone. It is a framework for how progress happens and why it often does not. It challenges you to stop seeing the future as a continuation of the past and start seeing it as an open space waiting to be shaped. Every breakthrough, every monopoly, and every real innovation begins with someone who believed the future could be designed and acted accordingly. If you found value in this journey through 0 to 1, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to my channel, Audiobook Library, where we break down powerful books, ideas, and mindsets that help you think deeper and build smarter. Your support helps this channel grow, and more importantly, it helps bring ideas like these to people who are ready to move from copying the world to creating it.